Good evening, friends. Welcome to the 28th episode of JHS Excellencia. A very interesting topic of the day. We have a very celebrated and senior faculty with us, Mr. Amit Pandit, who's a chartered accountant, a senior professional in the industry, and he brings with him a wealth of experience of over 3 decades. I will take you through his introduction. He's going to be speaking on the topic of mergers and acquisitions, integration, and challenges. I think it's one of the most contemporary topics. We read about so many M&A transactions happening in newspapers almost on a day-to-day basis, and you really enjoy the session because as I read Amit's profile, he has been part of a very large M&A transactions, supported them strategically, mentored, guided several boards. So let me quickly take you through Amit's profile. And as is a protocol, the speaker would be speaking for about 45 to 50 minutes. And all the participants are requested to stay on, the mute mode until the speaker completes his speaking session. And if there are any questions, raise your hands and put the questions in the chat board so it can be taken sequentially by the speaker. Uh, uh, Before we invite Amit onto the stage, quickly going through his profile. As I mentioned, he's a very senior chartered accountant with over 3 decades of experience in finance, investment, governance, and risk. He's the founder of FinRisk Doctor, a boutique firm that helps businesses and individuals improve their financial health, and also runs another partnership firm, AM Secured Investments, a wealth management firm. He is on several boards of mutual funds and has also previously served on boards of a bank and various listed entities with experience on both the sides of the table at the board level, leadership level, and also has been a very experienced auditor and consultant in the past. He has been involved in 4 bank takeovers, mergers, especially for Saraswat Bank, 2 for Saraswat Infotech, and several other M&A transactions. He has hands-on experience on mergers and acquisitions, investment advisory, finance-related training, business valuations, corporate finance, management auditing, financial investigations, risk advisory, and business process consulting. His industry exposure spans banking and financial services, capital markets, insurance, mutual funds, engineering, auto ancillaries, real estate, telecom, and shipping. Actually, the profile is so impressive that any young or budding chartered accountant who dreams of living a role, he would have everything mentioned in Amit's profile as he has gone through last 3 decades. Currently, Amit's priorities are focused on managing wealth of HNIs, of corporates, etc., treasuries, and also he advises clients on M&A investment banking, uh, especially streamlining business processes while acting as a strategic finance advisor to promoters, family-owned businesses. In his previous capacity, Amit has been part of various leading organizations such as SGCO and LLP, CNK and Associates. He was a vice president at Zara Shaw and Company, part of the strategic management group at GTL Limited, and worked in the investment banking division at Mafazzal Finance Company. He has been a visiting faculty and giving back to the society, and we are grateful to him for having taken the session today. He has been a visiting faculty at NMIMS, IBS, Vidyalankar, IES, Chetna, Balaji Institute, Pune, and has delivered lectures at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. He has conducted corporate finance training for L&T, Tata Motors, Exim, Afcons, Adani Group, and many more. His current positions include independent directorship at D-Link India, listed entity, independent directorship at LIC Mutual Fund, trustee company, founder director of AM Squares Private Limited, and founder director of Global Chamber for Saraswat Entrepreneurs, where he mentors a lot of entrepreneur startups and family-owned businesses. Previously, he has served as an independent director at Lovable Longeli, he has served as a director at Saraswat Cooperative Bank, Saraswat Infotech, and Omkar Specialty Chemicals. He is a member of Institute of Internal Auditors, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. So, welcome, Amit, to the 38th JHS Excellencia series. We are indeed grateful to you. And the topic of the day, mergers and acquisitions, integration and challenges, is going to be very interesting. We have already heard 180, 190 participants who are eagerly waiting to hear you. And over to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. So, I think there is a echo. Just a moment. Okay. So, thank you, Josefa, for having me over, and good afternoon to all of you all. I would want to talk about M&A integration and challenges depending on whatever time level lines we have. Uh, I'll start by sharing my screen. So, one moment, just give me a minute. Okay, I think the screen is visible. Good. So, again, good afternoon, everybody. What we are going to talk about today is the part for M&A where most of it's not the most glamorous part of M&A. Normally, when you talk about M&A, most of the people talk about what are the valuations, how I handled a deal. And that is by far the beginning of closing a deal. But the real essence of M&A is the integration between the two companies. Now, integration by far is one of the toughest tasks in every M&A. There are multiple issues involved in the integration. The easier part is shaking of hands and signing of the deal, because that's the easier part. Because the promoters feel like, okay, we are going ahead, we sign the deal. But the rest of the people, especially the finance team, especially the IT team, especially the cross-functional team of every company, has to work towards getting the integration model in place. Now, let me share a basic statistics. Now, post deal, what happens? What is the reality? Now, the reality, if you have to look at, if you look at Fortune magazine, they have put 70 to 75% of the acquisitions, okay, fail in terms of generating value, in terms of doing what is expected to be done. Now, this they have collated over last 40 years. Now, this is reality. Now, how this happens or why is this? It's like nobody comes. I mean, you would have seen so many, news which comes in the paper like about various deals which are falling apart for multiple reasons, for multiple things. However, what is key to be noted is an M&A to be successful, the integration also needs to be successful. If my integration is not successful, then my M&A gets stuck at that level only because then it's a good deal. But subsequently that deal benefits do not accrue because the integration has not happened. Now, again, what are the reasons why M&As fail? So I'll just touch upon quickly and then we'll go one by one to all of them. Sorry. One, obviously, there is corporate culture. Now, this is a key factor in every M&A where two cultures could have a clash because no two people are same. Similarly, no two companies are same. So there is a corporate culture issue. Then in most of the cases, there is a communication gap. Now, communication gap is a problem across every organization. and especially when two organizations meet and merge, then this also leads to, so this has also been listed down by majority of the studies which have gone across, including Harvard study, including Stanford study, including the Fortune study. Every single study has highlighted these are the major issues where M&As tend to fail. HR issues, lack of proper training, clashes between management, and we'll touch upon each of them one by one. So let's look at the first situation. The first integration, which is very important from an M&A perspective, is a cultural integration. Because when two entities meet up, when two entities merge, it's very essential that the cultures need to match. Obviously, the cultures would not immediately be readily synced. So you need to put an effort. So what are the challenges that we see, especially in the basic challenges that we see today in sorry, are disparity in work ethics. Now, work ethics could be different. Let me give you a very basic example. Now, there was obviously I would not be able to take specific names, but then I'll be able to tell you what happened in those situations. In especially a company which was a single promoter driven company, it got merged with MNC. The promoter wanted to exit, and the MNC took over the entire company. Now, the key factor was everything in that company was driven by the promoter. It is like the whole and soul of the company was the promoter. So practically speaking, you ask anything to anybody, there were fancy designations. So everybody was a director, everybody was a vice president, or whoever. So you ask them specifics, the whole answer was boss knows. So the whole issue is work ethics is one issue where there is a big gap. So especially and during due diligences, if this does not get pointed out, or if does then there is a problem when integration happens. Because how do you deal with? Now, I'll give you another example of work ethics in a bank. Now, this was a transaction between a smaller bank and a professionally large bank, private bank. Now, in that situation, what happened was when it was taken over, obviously the objective was, yes, the merger helps because the private sector bank gets an entry into the region. But the situation was work ethics. It was a typical bank which started at 8:30, the customer hours got over by 12:31, and the bank wound up its operations. I mean, the day-to-day operations, the branches wound up their day-to-day operations by 3:34. The private sector bank, it started at 9 and it has to work till the work is over. So that's how it works. So how do you integrate this sort of ethics? I mean, and these are typical situations. I'm just sharing practical issues because how do you handle them? Now, the other issue is, are the people qualified enough to take responsibilities? Because these are smaller banks. The larger banks have better systems. Larger banks have better mechanisms to handle. The smaller banks do not have that mechanisms to handle. So how do you handle that? So that was one issue. The second issue was getting the work styles in order, because these guys are not used to working starting at 9 o'clock and working till 9 at night or whatever till the time work is over. They were specific. They used to walk out at a particular time. So would they be comfortable in handling it? And again, for that, communication was very, very key. And this is one of the most daunting challenges, especially when we are looking at cultural integrations. Now, there are many such issues which come to the fray. So I just shared a couple of issues in one in a small promoter driven company and one in a bank. Now, as we go ahead, I'll talk about other cases as well. Now, what is the solution to this then? I mean, we talked about challenges. So what is the solution to this? Now, obviously, understanding the cultural assessments as to what is the culture, whether they would fit. Now, obviously, you cannot, in India, we don't have the situation like whenever we take over, we don't throw people out immediately. I mean, we have an assessment done. So that's another daunting task, getting the HR assessments in place, getting the people assessments in place, and establishing clear communication lines. Now, communication from the acquiring company to all the employees is a very, very critical part. So clear communication lines and also offering support system to employees who are taken over. Because the problem with the company being taken over is most of the employees believe our jobs are at stake. Because the company acquiring was always in a position of control or dominance, and therefore whenever an acquired company comes into play, the employees would say, oh, we may not be sure as to what happens to our jobs. So technically the communication line and the support system for employees need to be open. Now that is one of the mechanisms or solutions. The I explained this example, which I was between a family owned business and a professionally run business. So this is typically a situation which happens where, uh, 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 just to take another step ahead. Now, in cultural issues, most of the employees were treated as family members in the promoter driven company. Family members means everybody was, treated like, oh, you are my brother, you are my sister, etc., etc. And no documented SOPs were in place. So when the MNC took them over, they were in a shock that, oh, how do I handle? Now, most of these people used to work based on the push given by the promoter. So job responsibilities were not laid down very clearly. So they were asked, okay, you have to do this. So everybody was doing everything. So whoever is available knew everything. The point was when they got merged with the MNC. Now that is not what the MNC expected. They expected at least some basic things. So that did not come out possibly during their due diligence, but then this is what typically happened. So getting that integration is a key task. So one of the key factors, obviously, which is a problem today in the M&A is the cultural integration. So we go ahead. The next part of the integration is the workforce integration. Cultural means everything, but let's talk about specific workforce integration. Now, what are the challenges that we look at, especially? Now, this is typically, it happens whenever, two companies tend to come together. One is overlapping roles. Now, the company already has an admin, extra set of admin. The company already has a sales team. The company already has an accounting team. The company already has a lot of rules, and there could be overlap in terms of which are the people who would continue in those roles. There would be a substitution of roles. So that is a key challenge. The other is a lot of companies have ambiguity on the roles. What are the typical roles for an organization? Like, what would be a role in terms of the HR? What would be the role in terms of finance? What would be the role in terms of marketing? So those are clear-cut disparities which come especially when roles are overlapped. Then again, there are potential redundancies built in because two people doing the same job, not possible. Now, this happens especially, just to give an example of the bank again. Now, in a bank, suppose I'm handling a branch or I'm a branch operational person, then whether I would be in a position to handle the branch, because these are larger branches. The company is or the earlier bank was a smaller bank. So whether they would be able to handle the larger branch, because they are not so directly the same, because the work styles are also completely different. So that is a problem. And majority, as I said, the basic problem with the employees or the HR is most of them fear layoffs. So that's a key. So addressing the employee concerns is proactively is one of the key solutions. But it's easier said than done, because people want to say, okay, we would want to proactively handle the employee concerns, but at the same time, it needs to be done. There has to be a plan in place to actually get things rolling. Then providing mapping career development opportunities for the acquired company. Now, all the employees would need to be shown a plan as to what they would want. Now, possibly he was a senior person in the bank, but when he joins a larger bank, his position or his role would be not at the top level, but at some mid level, because as per the bank requirements, he may not fit the top level. So that is what they have to clearly explain. In terms of what you call people. Like I'll give you another example. Since I have been handling some bank mergers. So in one such situation, what has happened is when a smaller bank was taken over, uh, we actually had to do a complete review of the people, all the personnel of the bank as to what is their caliber, whether they would fit into our scheme of things, whether they would be in a position to handle. Because, for example, in the smaller bank, they had not handled a loan above 5 crores. However, in a larger bank, a 5 crore is done at a branch. There, even at a corporate level, they had not handled a loan of 5 crores. It was a very small bank. So, if that is a situation, how would they handle the larger size? So, whether they would be in a position to do it, or you need to train them. If they are not, again, whether they are fit enough to be trained, whether there could be age not on their side, they would not be. So, there could be multiple such things. In one such situations, we found out that the majority of the people were of the lower category, which were basically clerks and superintendents or boys, whereas there were handful people in the qualitative category. So how would you distinguish? You cannot take everything separately. So at that point of time, it was decided that we create a separate cadre for these people. So it depends, again, case by case. So I'm just sharing what was done in one such situation. A separate cadre was created for the new, because they were not in line with the existing company's hierarchy. They were not qualified in line with the existing company's hierarchy or the qualification matrix. And then what the challenge was, how do I then handle it? So, but yeah, you cannot even throw people out immediately. But then, as per the agreements, uh, uh, there was an agreement which said, okay, for 3 to 4 years, we will not be able to terminate. But then, depending on performance, we can take a call. So post 3 years, obviously severance packages, the VRS, CRS were defined. And then obviously along with that, counseling. So it's one of the solutions, especially when we are looking at that is the example that I explained. Now I'll explain another example of another company which was a cross-border sort of a situation. Now, typically, India, at least you are in a position to look at, because most of the Indians have similar thought profiles. But when you are dealing with international or a cross-border transaction, uh, the cultural ethos is completely different. Now, in what such situation, there was this company which had taken over a Far East Asian, a Korean company, for instance. Now, Korean company is typically Koreans have a different thought process. Now, they were explained a lot of things that, okay, we would do this, but they simply didn't want to work under the new promoters. They said, no, we will not work. So how then would you handle the workforce integration if the worker or the people, or right from everybody? So at the end, bottom line, what happened is they had to get the existing CEO, who was the CEO of that company, to run that company for the time being. So they had to, and then most of the people were sent from here, were called back, and they used their local people to run the company. So this, again, as I said, case by case, there is no guideline. I mean, what comes up is for first time you come to know when you handle an M&A transaction. So this is just an example that I shared. So their ethos was, they were very proud of their heritage, and they said, no, it is finally they were convinced that, okay, these are people who have come, they are also wanting to grow the company will not change, only the owners have changed hands, the management will remain the same. And then after a few months, they started warming up to this. So they lost a few months in getting that whole thing integrated, and they started warming up over a period, and then finally things started falling in place. So these challenges do come up. As I said, no straight answer. You have to try. It's basically trial and error. Some works, sometimes something works, sometimes something doesn't work. So it's always a trial and error. It again depends on how things emerge out of that. So that happens, especially, and workforce integration is a very, very key part. And especially if the workforce is not aligned as per the requirement of the acquiring company, then it's a massive challenge, because the quality of workforce is the key, especially when I am acquiring. And 90% of the time, I mean, if you look at why I'm sharing this, is because when we do due diligence, now there could be a lot of professionals who would be on this, that when we do due diligence, what do we technically look at? Okay. Do we look at the workforce in detail? Do we look at, I mean, it needs to be reviewed, because you need to know what are you getting into. Now, in most of the cases, the due diligences are done in a span of a few days or a few weeks. So does it cover, or will it be in a position to cover everything? Now, this is something that one has to ask, because due diligence does not take everything into account. So sometimes you get surprises after all this. That is why, as I said, integration becomes a key factor, and workforce integration is one of the toughest things to handle, because of the one, there is a cultural mismatch, and second, it is like, you need people to run businesses, because without them you cannot run businesses. You can't export people from this place to the other place, for wherever it is. So that's how that's the most important part that one looks at, especially when we are looking at workforce integration. The third type is basically communication. But what challenges would you see when one looks at communication? Now, normally breakdowns occur because of different communication styles. Now, there could be specific communications, like Indians are used to having specific, Americans are used to having a direct communication. So, Indians treat people with respect, Americans treat people with first name. So obviously communication, there could be communication gap. There could be an unintentional gap which could result on account of a communication. So one has to be very careful, especially when drawing how to communicate. Now, after an M&A, typically it is in most of the companies, there are only a few people who are given the responsibility to communicate, because not everybody, because the moment everybody starts communicating, once things settle in or once things integrate. However, some people are given the responsibility to get that communication thing done, because, as I said, there are multiple styles. If there is unclear messaging or lack of transparency, then obviously they can result in misunderstanding, because and typically we are seeing, Indians have a trait. I mean, this is to lighten a little bit, that what the trait is like, when you communicate to a Indian person and you ask him, what is your view? Yes or no? He nods his head this side and this side. He does not nod his head this way or this way. So the international guys don't understand what is this. Now, this is typically Indian, like when he nods from one side of the shoulder to the other side of the shoulder. How do you understand what is he trying to communicate? So sometimes they don't understand. So, and in most of and they are direct. So when they don't understand, so this is like, that's why I'm saying, so sometimes communication becomes very, and it can result in, then if it is misunderstood, there could be rumor mongering, there could be resistance. Now, this typically happens at various. Now, a typical situation, like in some cases, now it has been known that some banks are going to be merged, the PSUs. Now you see what is happening. Now they understand that the bad PSU, or the not so, or I should say the weak PSU banks, will be merged with the strong PSU banks. Some have already happened, the balance are yet to happen. But now the employee unions are up in arms, so that's a resistance, and they're saying no, they want to throw us out, they want to do this. So, and this is typically because my communication channels are not very clear. They need to be told, they need to be explained, and they need to be comforted with proper communication. Now, if communication does not happen, and this happens in majorly most of the transactions that we see, the communication ends up in a mess. Now, again, I'll give you another example of the latest situation. We handled a case recently. Now, this was a healthcare company which was acquired by a larger healthcare company. Now, in typically the healthcare company, especially a smaller hospital, it's a doctor-driven hospital, right? So a particular person is, or a particular doctor is driving it. So everybody reports to him, her, or the family per se, right? As a now, when it gets acquired by a larger or a corporate set, the corporate wants processes to be put in place. The corporate wants the employee start saying, no, now my job roles are going to be, so I will get a demotion. My job role is getting shortened. So communication has to be of utmost importance, especially when such things happen. Now, the promoter kept on telling that, no, no, don't worry, this will happen, but there was no response from the corporate side. So when there was no response from the corporate side, the employees felt jittery. And then they started, oh, they don't want us only. And then they did not pay attention to the work. And especially, you understand, in a hospital, even a small, mistake can be devastating. Now, especially the nurses in the OT, the nurses, etc., who handle these transactions were a little upset, saying, no, we don't know what is going to happen. So that is where communication becomes very important. So the solutions could be, it's very simple, establish clear communication line, but it's easier said than done. And you have to provide. So who has to provide? The acquiring company has to provide. They have to provide regular updates. They have to encourage dialogue. They have to sit with the employees to talk, because if they don't, obviously it leads to a lot of resistance, it leads to a lot of rumor mongering, and so on and so forth. So all these are key situations which come. Again, I'll explain another situation of a low cost airline and a full service airline. Now, this is a typical situation. This merger took place way earlier. Now, what happened in this situation was, the acquisition was done with an intention that they would grow the business. Now, there were two business lines. A low cost airline runs on a particular business model, where a full service airline runs on a particular business model. Now, both models are slightly different, but low cost airline essentially is like faring from local destinations or whatever. So in this situation, the communication was absolutely unclear. What would the new company do with the old people in the low cost? So obviously there were, so whether everything was going to be full blown, or the low cost airline would still continue as a low cost airline. Now, this communication was not clear, and therefore costs started ramping up. There was inefficiency in the processes. There was, and because of which the losses mounted, and at the end of the day, the entire business went bad. Now, this is typically a situation with a lot of organizations where, you think at the beginning, yeah, this is going to be the next great deal. But when you actually walk through, when you actually go through, you come to know that there are challenges, and these are the problems which you see going forward. So communication channels need to be very, very open. The next, again, the major part, the IT and the process integrations. So, I mean, all would know what are the challenges in IT. Now, there are multiple systems running. So we have technology challenges every time. Technology is the main disruptor today. So today, disparate systems, they can disrupt business operations, data integrity. Let me give another example here, a very practical example again. Now, especially two companies merging together. Now, it's a smaller company and a larger company. Now, the larger company has an ERP software. The smaller company runs on Tally, because they are not interested in running the ERP software, because according to them, for them, it's a cost. So they would want things to happen. So when the data gets transferred, how do you ensure that entire data is getting transferred? So that those are challenges of transferring. So what data is available, what data is sacrosanct, all of that has to then there are systems there is a separate HR system, there is a separate system for manufacturing, there could be a separate system for leave, there could be a separate system for, there are multiple systems. So whether they integrate properly. Now, let me give you an example of another issue, especially with the two banks. Now, I talked about that situation where there was a smaller bank and a larger bank getting acquired. Now, in that situation, I'll talk about how now the smaller bank had a very small ERP system because they were running only a few branches and they were running on a smaller system because they were not having the larger ERP system. So they had a CBS, but a small CBS. The larger bank had a defined CBS, which was a standard CBS, or the top one of the top CBS runs. So when the integration was happening, especially the IT integration, the key issue came up as to obviously when banking data gets transferred or when banking data gets migrated, you have to transfer from all date, like right from the beginning, because you need to understand what is the customer relationship like, since when is a relationship. Now, what happened is the people in a smaller bank typically said, okay, if we have to transfer data, like some of our junior people take, let us only transfer the balances. The rest is there in the backend files. And they did that. Now, which resulted in a lot of problems for the bank because they were not able to trace, because they only imported the balances. They did not migrate the entire data. And then they had to redo the whole thing. Obviously, there was a challenge because some of the people were not from the acquiring company, were not fully involved in the process. So obviously that led to this problem. But then these problems can arise in IT and you don't know when that comes in, especially when you are integrating multiple systems. Now, a typical situation, even if, for a larger company, even if I have two separate ERPs, the existing company is running Oracle and the acquiring company is running SAP. Again, integrating data is time consuming. It is and because everything is linked to my ERP. So my CRM is linked to my ERP, my production is linked to my ERP, my sales team, they are linked. So I have to migrate the entire system. So this is a big challenge, and typically this problems are faced especially in IT, and they continue for a longer period of time, and that is why, and it still continues. So everywhere. So a solution is, especially when acquisitions happen, the key is get an IT team in place before or at the time of doing due diligence. So it is like, you know what is available. So what needs to be done, because it is better planned, because after the deal, it is like they want to run and close it faster. So a IT due diligence needs to be done before. So, and a clear integration plan. So again, which are the critical processes, which are the critical systems, which need to be looked into, and then get all of that put together. Now, this is something which needs to be done. Now, as I said, the biggest example is importing data and the integrity challenges, because today with privacy, especially if it is a cross-border merger, then privacy is, again, India is also getting into that privacy mode, but then having that is a very, very key part. India still, a lot of things have to be done, but as long as international things are concerned, they are very, very stringent on these issues. So data import and integrity challenges are the key problems that you face. And again, processes. Now, as a part of processes, now most of the processes get linked into my IT ERP system. So my SOP essentially includes my entire process mapping to the IT system, because the ERP is IT. Now, if that is not there, possibly the new system will have a new mechanism, a new process to be put in place. So all that needs to be looked into, because you will have to put in a new set of process. Because suppose I was working on an Oracle. Now Oracle has a X set of process. Now I move to SAP. SAP has a Y set of process. Now there could be similarities, but then obviously the processes are different as to how they run. And that is the reason why this becomes relevant, especially when we are looking at the integration. The another part obviously is retention of customers. Now, this typically happens especially when companies take over other companies. The customers need to be in service companies. Yes, it is the quality of service, but in a product company, I need to keep the same products running. So customers also tend to get a little unnerved, or essentially, because in terms of whether the same set of services or the same set of products will continue, or the new company will simply not take into account what is happening. So customers need to be taken into account. So proactive communication, I mean, personally engaging, especially IT company. Now, when we happen to do some IT mergers, now this is typically a situation which customers need to be comforted that we can handle, or the new company can handle. So existing people will still continue. We'll have the same relationship manager. Nothing changes. So there is a need to schedule meetings, calls, meeting the customers with the existing team members, because that only leads, and that is why we need to maintain the quality of interaction, because that only helps us to convince the customer that, yeah, this, you will not face disruption in services, you will have the same type of services. And this is a typical problem. Now I'll also explain in terms of two IT companies. Now, there was this one which was IT company, essentially, which due to poor governance got merged into another IT company. Now, in during that time, especially since it was a promoter-induced fraud, the key factor was the customers of that company had to be comforted that, okay, the new company has the wherewithal to handle it. So obviously everybody works, so they were large companies, so they were able to handle it. But at a smaller level, it is tough, because customers need to have the conviction that the new person coming over, or the new company which is taking over, would be able to handle the same set of or the type of relationship. Now, this is a typical problem with promoter driven companies. Now, if I'm a promoter driven company and I sell off to a larger fit, most of the customers know me personally as a promoter of that company. So when I sell to a larger fit, it's a professional managed company. So obviously the promoter is not going to connect. It would be the professionals who are going to connect. But the customers have been used, or I mean, are used to taking up a phone and talking to the promoter. So sometimes they feel, no, no, I want to talk to the promoter. Now, those are issues. So they need to be addressed in a specific manner. And again, there has to be, as I said, continuity, and try to avoid disruptions of services, and obviously get the customer feedback. The key factor is not only get it, you have to act on the customer feedback, because that's a key part of the customer retention, especially when we are looking at an M&A transaction. So there could be surveys come up, there could be focus group, feedback forms to understand what is it that the customers need, what is it that the customers are looking at. Sorry. So what are the key factors which the customers would want to look at? So these things would be very, very critical, especially in customer retention. Regulatory compliances. This is also another challenge today nowadays, with a lot of regulatory issues coming up. So the key challenges obviously is navigating the regulatory landscape. Now, regulatory landscape can be very, very complex, especially when merging companies operate in different jurisdictions. Uh, Now, with the set which is like on a continuous basis, if I am running on multiple cross-country mergers, etc. Now, they have a lot of regulatory compliances to handle. So obviously, it's a good thing from the professional perspective, but from the company perspective, it is harrowing. I mean, just to give you a basic example, it has nothing to do with M&A, but a simple situation. Like recently, if you have heard the news, there was a beverage company, alcohol beverage company, which got which is in the process of getting into an IPO. Now they had a problem because they've converted from a private company to a public company. So it was a private limited. They got to change the name from a private limited to public limited. They had to do all compliances. So they could not sell their products with the old name. So they had to have the new name put on their label. So it was a harrowing task. So they lost a lot of business. So means I'm just trying to explain that today regulatory compliances, like especially for all pharmaceutical companies, FDA compliances are very critical. So when I take over, if there is a problem, now I'll give you an example. Now I'm not, and this is a very, very critical example as to when something like this happens, especially then there are problems. Now there was this US company which acquired a Indian company. Now this was into the services business. The US company was a large listed company in the US. Now, when you have a large listed company in the US, the US companies who deal across, they have to adhere to the FCPA norms. That is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now, when you adhere to FCPA norm, there are certain things that your vendors need to be compliant. Everybody who is dealing with the company needs to be compliant from an FCPA perspective. Now they acquired this company. This was an Indian company, but the Indian company had operations in parts of Asia like Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and some parts of Africa. And this was, as I said, a US listed company, and they acquired this company, and somebody had conducted the due diligence. Now they came to us at a later stage because they wanted some issues to be addressed. So that time they got a notice that from the FCPA that you are non-compliant in certain things. Now, the Indian company, especially when it was dealing with the Bangladesh government, etc., or the Nepal government and Sri Lankan government, so there were certain things which were done which were not in good shape. And obviously, the US FCPA, they got to know something and they said, no, you are. So they then actually debarred. I mean, they used to do construction contracts for the World Bank, etc., and they had multiple other things from. So all their international empanelments were put on hold and blacklisted just because they did not complete the detailed FCPA compliance. Now, this is at a cost. So the company has spent a few hundred crores on acquisitions. And then you come to know that you cannot do business with anything because you are blacklisted for certain regulatory compliance not being done. So this is a major challenge. So especially when I am looking at regulatory compliance, I need to be very, very you know what I should say, uh, prepared for handling anything. So you need to have a plan. The plan needs to be doing a comprehensive review, because with whichever jurisdiction I fall into, whether I am compliant, because one small non-compliance and my business can be put on hold, and that's a very, very large aspect of regulatory compliance. Then again, need to have a dedicated team to oversee the integration process, because you need to know what, because suppose it's in the same industry, possibly you have the team, but if it comes from a different industry, like it's a diversification, a merger for diversification, then they need to be aware of what are the other facilities that what are the other regulations that would be impacting this. So those are the key things. And last but not least in this is, it needs continuous monitoring, because regulatory compliance is always ongoing. You cannot say my regulatory compliance can stop. So there is a need for continuous monitoring and regular ongoing compliances, because otherwise this is a large risk. So regulatory compliance becomes another hurdle. So a lot of M&As have been have gone into a problem because of regulatory compliances. They have, I mean, world over also, even in India, I mean, you could see a lot of things get into or get stuck because of regulatory compliance, especially the insurance mergers, etc. So, and obviously the financial integration. Now, when one looks at the financial integration, because by and large, we tend to look at multiple things. So when we say financial integration, at the end, it is like merging my financial systems. And so merging financial system, as I said, again, everything has to know right from my statement of account to my accounting data to my schedule of accounts, everything needs to be looked into. Even we have seen cases where I'll just share an example that the existing company was running the latest version of SAP, whereas the company that was being acquired had an older version of SAP. Now, technically, it was SAP, but there were some additional things which were not done in the existing because they had not taken up those modules, etc. So when they wanted to integrate, they were not able to get all the data. They got part of the data, but they did not get the rest of the data. So again, these are, I mean, I'm just sharing that these are issues that even the accounting data could not shift completely because of multiple challenges, that they faced. So these are things that come up. So obviously, one needs to have a plan to unify the financial systems and processes, ensuring consistency, accuracy, standardizing the processes. Now, obviously, all accounting needs to be standardized because wherever there is deregulation, wherever there is a segregation of duty, wherever there is branch accounting coming into play, they all need to have a standardized reporting process and a procedure. So that is a key part. And last part, which is the most critical part, internal controls getting to be strengthened. So you need to strengthen the internal control processes because financial discrepancies can come because my internal controls are not in place. Now, there could be accounting issues, which one has to also understand that my existing company works on a different accounting plan. The company that is getting acquired works on a different accounting plan. So one has to be a little circumspect about how do I look at, but yes, financial integration, because finally at the end of the day, I need to get my finances out, my financial accounts out. So this, though I say that it's a part of my regular plan, I have kept it towards the end. And so what one needs is to create cross-functional teams because every department needs to have a person who is from the finance team because he needs to understand how that data is getting moved. Because from a supply chain perspective, there has to be one person who's dedicated from the supply chain, one person from the AR, one person from the production planning team. So everywhere you need a person from the finance team because at the bottom or at the end of the day, it is everything pushes itself into the financials. So one needs to have a detailed plan, right, to ensure that all my back end is fully integrated. So that's why we need to have a cross-functional team in place to look at the financial integration. And obviously, M&As are done with an objective to generate synergies. Now, synergies obviously is would happen depending on how well you integrate. Because if I'm not able to integrate now, especially the cost savings, whether I'm able to do a cost saving, whether I'm able to increase the market share because of the acquisition, if I'm not able to have, if I don't have the plan to handle it, it's a big challenge. And then if integration is not done, how synergies can be used? So there have been things where people have acquired companies, however, synergies have got reflected after a period of time because they have not been able to integrate the whole thing properly. So there are, I mean, especially if it is across border merger. Now, in a telecom company, they acquired, so it took a long time for even that Indian company which acquired the African telecom setup. They took a lot of time to put things in place. So when we went for doing the reviews on diligences as to what was the actual problem, there were multiple problems because they expected the synergy to work as in the way they worked in India. But that's a different market altogether. Everything works in a different plan. So they were not ready for the surprise, and therefore they had to incur an incremental cost. So the synergy went for a toss, and they did not get the synergy benefits for nearly I mean, I should not say a couple of years, but a lot many years. So it took them a long time to get things put in place. So getting a synergy plan, tracking the progress becomes a key factor in any integration. Now, because without a synergy plan, it does not work. Like if I don't have a proper supply chain integration, it can lead to missed cost saving opportunities. It could lead to incremental inefficiencies and so on and so forth. So this becomes another part. So at the end of the day, as I'm saying that, everything you need to have a very clear path defined. You need to have a very clear plan which is defined. So nothing is over planning. Everything is a plan, and you need to know if the plan execution is not working, you need to change the thought processes. So that's what happens typically in an M&A, and that is why no two M&As are the same. If you can use it as a guide, but it does not necessarily mean it is the same, because it is different. Everything is different, and everything you have to start from scratch. So typically, as we roll and as we come to a close, so these are the few things which, sorry. This is not getting on the last slide. Okay, as we close, I say these few things, that what you need to focus is to focus on getting the processes of integration right. Have a plan, try to work on the plan, and ensure that it works, because no two plans work in the same fashion. There could be some pluses somewhere, there could be some minuses, but wherever there are minuses, try to take immediate rectification action, which you say course correction, you can say, and try to work on that integration plan. I think I will stop. I have already, I think, increased my time. So thank you so much. So in case you have any questions, I would be happy to take it up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pandit. It was a very exciting session, and uh, regret that we had some technical glitches in the beginning, but I'm sure that people would have got a lot of inputs from this. So we will start with some questions which are coming from participants, and I would request that if anybody has any question, you kindly put it in the chat box so we can convey it to the speaker. First question is from Fatima Salmani, one of our JHS family members. What strategies can companies use to retain key talent and maintain operational stability post-merger?
Okay. Now, this is a critical question, because retaining key talent is always what is a key factor for every organization. Now, retaining key talent depends on what the company offers. Most of the companies would want to retain talent. So, but there is no single answer to what it is. The personal policies have to be in sync. If it is like, because I can share a lot of examples where, even going to a bigger fit, a lot of people are not comfortable in the larger organization, because possibly the processes are different. They are not comfortable in handling with the new process, etc. So the strategies that the company generally use is, they want to give them some incentives. They want to promote them. They want to increase their salary levels. So this does happen, but again, as I said, it depends on case to case. So there could be no standard or a single answer, but one has to look at the routine ways in which you would look at in your company to retain talent. Similarly, the same thing, because one thing you can obviously put when you get into an agreement to a merger, that the people would not be moved out for a couple of years. But that does not stop a person from resigning.
you cannot throw him out, but he can choose to resign because that's his independent way. So how you stop him is depending on how good your HR policy is to handle it.
Thank you so much, sir. I think one of our esteemed guests, Mr. Satish Shona, has a question. Sir, you have opened your mic. You can please ask your question. Sir, I think you are on mute. Satish, sir. Satish, sir, can you put your question in the chat box if it is possible? Okay, in that time, we can take one more question. So this is question from Zisha. How can companies transform volatile market conditions into strategic opportunities during merger and acquisitions?
Very difficult to answer.
Basically,
See,
opportunities out of chaos.
yeah, so see, every chaos is an opportunity by default, because all chaos or all volatility leads to opportunities. How you handle it is you need to be conservative. You need to have, see, today most of the issues happen because the values or the valuations are done based on extreme high figures. And then if you look at from a normal investor perspective or a buyer perspective, what would he look at? If he pays an X amount, he is obviously looking at a return on investment. So if he's looking at a return on investment, if he pays a higher amount, and if that does not generate or that does not culminate into profit, then obviously whatever the amount you paid goes waste. So technically speaking, volatility is going to remain. It's always going to remain. So businesses are there. So a classic situation is in 2008, just before the meltdown of the world financial meltdown, as we call it, or the subprime crisis, as we call it. Most of large Indian companies ended up buying or acquiring international targets at super high valuations. But subsequently, and all were done through the LBO route, that is the leverage buyout route. And immediately after that, because of the meltdown, the businesses did not work. Businesses did not work, and therefore, at the end, to just service the loans, they had to sell off a lot of the buying company assets. So these are challenges that you face, especially. And most of the time, mergers which are done in the boom time are always done at a higher cost. So you have a lot of Indian companies facing problems on account of that. There is one pharmaceutical company which is still getting out of a problem because they bought companies left, right, and center just prior to the meltdown. And after the meltdown, they were not able to even generate that amount of revenue. So forget the profit. They were not able to generate the revenue. So how do you handle that? So see, businesses is running a business is a challenge. How you value handle, so you need to be conservative in your valuations, what you are going to give when you're buying out the company. And that's a key, because the return on investment is the only matrix that actually works in an M&A, irrespective of what you talk about.
Just take this question forward. Looking at the current global scenario, with things which are happening across US, Europe, different foreign policies coming into place, do you think this is the correct time or the opportune time to go in for merger acquisitions, or it is a wait and watch approach?
There, as I said, there is no right or wrong time for M&A. It's like, if it depends. See, according to me, I always share this, the value, like beauty, lies in the eyes of the beholder. So if you believe that there is value, you buy. If you believe there is no value, irrespective of whether it is in a depression or whether it is in a boom time, you will not buy if you are not getting value. So your key factor is, when a person wants to buy or when a business has to acquire something, it needs to be giving him a good return on investment. And if that is not in place, then at no time is good for you.
So another question coming your way, sir. How can a company's brand and culture be leveraged to not only survive but thrive post merger?
See, a brand is a good situation. But leverage in the sense, okay, let me give you a practical example. Now, suppose there is a large bank which acquires a smaller bank. Now, what happens? All of a sudden, the smaller bank, see, a smaller bank may not be able to generate business because people need to trust, people need, the moment the board on the branch, sorry, moment the board on the branch changes from a smaller bank to a larger bank, what happens is automatically businesses start coming in because it's a larger bank. So the brand automatically gets leveraged, especially when a smaller organization gets merged in a larger organization. So the brand automatically gets merged and therefore it has to. But if it is a smaller brand, then yes, it takes. So today, if you look at now, why brands are important? Brands are important because without brands, you cannot. Like for example, recently, a couple of years ago, Hindustan Lever acquired Horlicks as a brand, okay, from GSK. Now, they are anyway into children food, but why Horlicks is a brand? So today, brands run only on names. That okay, there is something like today, if I have to say, even if you go to a village today, you have to look at a toothpaste, and you say, you give me a Colgate dena bhai. So the person understands that you need a toothpaste. He may not have Colgate, he will give you another toothpaste, but he will give you a toothpaste. That Colgate is a brand, right? So similar to that, Horlicks is a brand. So technically, if you look at from a perspective of businesses, brands are very critical or very relevant because without a brand now, एक toothpaste लेना मतलब he will give you anything. So that's what brand becomes very important.
How can you protect exit or active participation of merging company from the running of the business?
How can you protect exit or active participation?
Merging company from running.
See, I don't know, but I'll answer it in a way. What happens is normally whenever, suppose I am a company that is merging with a larger entity, the larger entity will enter into a non-compete clause for me, that I will not be able to do similar businesses for a particular period of time. Now, depending on the comfort, it could be 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, depending. Now, because I cannot do same business, I can do any other business, but I cannot do same business. Now, suppose, for example, just to give an example, suppose I have a diagnostic lab, okay? A corporate acquires my diagnostic lab. There are a lot of corporates, there's a lot of consolidation happening. So corporate acquires my diagnostic lab. Now, if a corporate acquires my diagnostic, they will come into and have a non-compete with me, right? You cannot do this lab business with anybody for the next so many years. Otherwise, they can file a compensation claim and then it could be a problem. So it's a non-compete. So automatically it is protected. If I've answered your question, if there is something else that you're looking at, then you can rephrase that question. Because I felt this is what you're looking at. So
Last question. Last question in the interest of time, that is, how do you address the challenge of blending two distinct company cultures while maintaining employee morale? Just to add that, one final thing would be, in a M&A, typically, what is the time frame you look at to have a, I would not say perfect, but at least a good enough integration so that there are few challenges ahead?
integration is something which nobody can give a time frame to. If everything is good, it can happen in 1 month, 2 months, even 6 months. If something is not good, then it can go on for years also. Even then, integration doesn't happen. There are so many things that happen on because you have to integrate everything, right? So a lot of people today, what they do is to help this out or erase this issue. They run that outfit with the same set till they integrate over a period of time. Like for instance, today I have acquired a company. I will run the company on the same set and principles and then slowly start integrating one by one. So I'll take one first, I'll take the second first. So I'll take the HR first, then I'll take the other departments and then slowly the finance department. So that also is a mechanism. Or there could be a one hard stop and say that no, everything merges from day one. which needs then a lot of integration issues. So there are a lot of things that go into play when one has to look at this. But at the same time, the challenges typically is the cultures, as I said, is a major integration problem. So getting the cultures together is the first thing. The rest fall in place over a period. But normally cultures take time to get aligned.
I think the questions will not stop, but unfortunately, we have reached the end of our session time. So, just to encapsulate what Mr. Pandit has talked about during our session, the challenges which come about are never talked about. Most of us look at the glamour part of, as you rightly said, of our M&A, looking at the figures, the valuation, the big names. But what we are actually looking at is the integration of the companies to derive the synergic value which is expected of them. So we are looking at cultural integration, workforce integration, communications, IT, customer retention, regulatory compliance, financial integration. I think the thing which comes out of this entire exercise is the importance of communication with the stakeholders. The different stakeholders, like you may have employees on one side of the acquired company, the customers, the regulatory aspect. So all these things have to be thought out, they have to be planned. As he has rightly said, there has to be a cross-functional team to assist in the integration. So there has to be a plan, the plan has to be worked upon, and a regular review has to be done and rectification has to be done so it works as it has been envisaged. And hopefully have an integration timely and in place where even the acquiring company and the acquired company have comfort working together, which is actually the purpose of having a merger and acquisition. So I think, sir, it has been a very enlightening session, and probably one session is not enough, but we hope to have another session to address the other aspects of this wonderful topic. Absolutely. And I would just request all of you to join me in a vote of thanks, applause for the wonderful session which we had today. Thank you. Thank you so much to all our participants for participating in this session and being patient for the delay. Thank you so much and have a nice day to all of you. Thank you.